Welcome back to Encod and welcome back to another industry interview. Today with us we have Jamie Buckner, a producer, production manager, and director. Jamie had his directorial debut in 2016 with the movie Split, and since then he's worked in movies like Paranormal Activity, Absolution, and today's topic, Companion. Jamie is the first one to join us from Companion, but we had the opportunity to talk to other people that worked in this amazing movie. And thanks to that, you're gonna get to learn a lot about how it was filmed, like the writer's strike or the actor's strike. How did it affect Companion? Before we go into the interview, make sure you like, subscribe, and comment for more industry interviews from people that worked on your favorite movies. And without further ado, Jamie Buckner.
Thanks for having me. My name's Jamie Buckner. I am on Companion, this project we're here to talk about, I was executive producer and production manager. More or less, you'll some refer to it as a line producer. I don't love that term because I think it sort of pigeonholes folks in that profession a little too much for my taste, the way I do it anyway, and was brought up. But I'm, producer, executive producer, line producer, production manager, writer, director. Just, the easiest way, if I ever put it on a name tag, I just say storyteller. I'm a professional storyteller. And how I got into the business, into this, I for as long back as I can remember, I wanted to create, and I've been writing for as long as I can remember. I drew pictures and wanted to draw comic books for a long time. Play a little music. So I sort of in my later teenage years, it dawned on me that a lot of the things that I liked a little bit all came together in one particular discipline, and that's in film, in motion pictures, be it television, be it limited series, be it features. I mostly, the reason I really got into this was movies. Honestly, I've dabbled in a little bit of the different ways that you can cut it up, but really, your typical feature is really my wheelhouse and my passion. So yeah, I guess that's really it. I grew up in Kentucky, fell in love with a girl during college that was a playwright. I had planned on moving to LA. She said, "Okay, see you later. I'm moving to New York." And I said, "Hold on a second, I'll go check out New York." And that's where we live now. That was my girlfriend at the time, who is now my wife. So yeah, that's the very, very short version of it.
Like a movie me kid.
Right. That's
A
awesome.
little bit. I mean, the way we met, I directed her senior project as a playwright in college down Northern Kentucky University, so right outside of Cincinnati. But yeah, it's a pretty great story. I joke, but I mean it's really true. Our relationship is almost exactly as long as my time in the film industry. We had just first started dating when I got my first movie job. So yeah.
That's awesome.
So in this movie, at least on paper, your role is a bit more on the businessy side of filmmaking, but we can get into that in a little bit. You in 2016, you had a little bit of a taste of directing a feature film with your movie Split, and I know that was a short beforehand. But are you interested in continuing to pursue directing or writing, and that kind of, I guess, the more creative jobs that people tend to look at?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I joke a little bit that, I kind of messed around and got the world's best fallback plan in producing. I really, my drive has always been to write and direct. And it's really my primary focus, but you have to pay the bills somehow or another. So I came up through production office work and, production coordinating, supervising, managing, all that sort of thing. So, and instead of trying to break into the business while like waiting tables or working retail, I have been fortunate enough to like work on movies and work my way up the ladder in physical production like that. But yeah, writing, directing is really, like right now, I'm directing a documentary, about my nephew that we lost to a really rare type of terminal brain cancer a few years back. Doing a little bit of an awareness piece on that. And I also have a scripted feature called Due East that we're, financing for now and have a wonderful cast. And I can't say a ton about it, but yeah, I'm poised to be back in the director's chair. I mean, I'm back in the director's chair right now. It's just a matter of getting things sort of out into the world. But yeah, that's really my primary passion. That's kind of why what I was saying about line producing. I think the way that I've done it and the way I kind of have to do it and the people I've come up around and been very fortunate to come up around, it really is a creative position. It is very numbers focused. It is, making sure things stay on time and on budget and things like that. The responsibilities are very specific to the business elements of it. But I do think there's so much marriage between that and the creative. Companion's a prime example. Like, we only have a certain amount of money to make the movie, but I'm working really closely with Drew, the director, of, okay, so what are we, and Eli, our DP, and Sienna, our AD, and all of the wonderful crew we had on that. And just, okay, this is the bottom line. This is how much money we have. We have a finite amount of resources. What are the pieces we want to prioritize? How do we get the maximum amount of money on screen and make as few creative compromises as possible? So I do really look at it as a creative position through and through, just because I don't know how else to look at it. But yeah, the short answer is, like, yes, absolutely. Writing, directing, never really do I lose focus of that. And I have a couple things coming up around the corner.
That's amazing. It's really exciting to see someone like you that has been kind of like on both sides of filmmaking and is seeing it all. And I mean, we're trying to do our own stuff as well, so we understand that it's difficult to just be like, yeah, I'm gonna go and direct and
only do that.
we'll figure out money.
Yeah, it's a very I was talking to, I went to some upstate New York meeting seminar. I can't remember what it was, but we led into that conversation. Filmmaking and storytelling really is it's a privileged corner of the world, because as much as you want to create and you want to go out, like you said, just be like, I'm going to direct and I'm just going to go direct and I'll figure out bills. Not all of us can do that, and a lot of the people that you see that do really successful things right out of the gate, it's coming from privilege. It's not always a nepo baby situation, but, like, sometimes it's folks born into generational wealth or who have family money that can help them support their dreams. And this is why it's so important, I think, to champion, whenever possible, filmmakers and voices from marginalized communities, and just people who we're not hearing from all the time. Like, I mean, you can look at my resume, and how many movies have I worked on about rich people and their rich people problems, their rich white problems. And it's just like, how much more does the world really need of that? And again, I'm going to work on, the things that come my way and that, I'm lucky enough to be a part of. But I do think once you reach a certain point, it's important to take that power, that privilege, that position that I've gained over all my years of doing this, and try to champion, small stories and people whose voices who wouldn't otherwise be heard. But it's yeah, I mean, it's a very privileged thing, making art. It's gotten a lot more, the playing field's gotten a lot more level, I think, because anyone really can go out and just, like, tell a really good story with their iPhone, and or the technology has made it a lot more accessible. But really, I still think the things that are in mainstream media that we're seeing are often coming from people who have privileged backgrounds and are able to break those barriers a little bit more easily. So I like to think I try to do everything I can to help out folks who aren't born on third base, is a thing I like to say. Um, but yeah, absolutely. And no, you guys, I'd love to hear. I don't know if this is the platform, but you got to tell me what you're up to. I'm very curious. I always want to hear what type of stories folks are trying to tell.
Share that with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that for sure. Backtracking just a little bit for those who might not know, you mentioned numbers, you mentioned budgets. What was your role within Companion, as both executive producer and production manager?
Well, that particular role, this particular project, I get a call from, Boulder Light Pictures. They've been friends of mine since we did a very small movie called The Vigil in Brooklyn back in 2018, I think the fall of 2018. And then we took it to the TIFF Midnight Madness in, I believe that was 2019. So we've just been in contact. They did really well with that movie Barbarian. They did overseas, and made a real splash with, got a deal with New Line, and this is sort of their first project with New Line. And they just called me up and said, if you want to read this script, come check this out. It's a first time feature director, really wonderful guy. We think it's really great. And it just timed out. it worked out really well. I'd walk off the, ends of the earth for, Rafi and Tracy and JD and those guys. And New Line was absolutely incredible to work with. But they send me the script. I look at it. They say, "Can you put together a budget that's, within the amount of money that, we've been allotted to get this done?" I say, "Sure." And I create that puzzle piece that is a feature film budget, and considering all the different unions and where we're going to shoot it and the fringes and the taxes and what it's a dizzying amount of it. It's just a very complex spreadsheet. Every movie, you do the best you can without enough information, and then as time goes on, you scout, you find the right house. That was a whole project in and of itself, finding the right house and figuring out where we were going to shoot. Finally, find the house, get the team together. And, I'm not going to take you point by point how a movie's made, but it was an adventure. That was kind of the idea. Is, the guys from Boulder Light reach out. They say, "We've got this project. We've got an opportunity to do it. We'd love for you to help out." And then a year and a half, whatever it was later, there we were. And so this one was a little bit extra tricky because we got shut down right in the middle of making the movie because of the actors' strike. I think it was day 17 of 30. We just had to button it all up and then come back. I think 5 months later, 6 months later, we were fine for the writer's strike because we had a writer director, and Drew just didn't touch the script. He was very, reverent about that time. He's like, "Oh, my writers are on strike. I'm not touching the script. We have done our revisions and we're good." So he did like one final revision before that happened. And then that was our document. But then when the actors went on strike, we had to fold it for a little while.
Did
And
that put a
then
strain on the budget?
it did put a strain on the budget. It did. Without getting into this could be a whole podcast in and of itself. And Drew's mentioned it, and I think some of the cast has mentioned it a couple of times. But during the actors' strike, you saw the movie. It largely takes place in one really big, beautiful house. And during the strike, I was walking around in Manhattan and saw an email on my phone on Zillow. I've been sharing like the Zillow link, and people are like, "Where's the house? What's going on?" Like people trying to figure out where to go, and Zillow just tracks that you're interested in that house, I guess. And I got an email on a Friday afternoon that house had sold. And so
Wow.
right in the middle of our stuff was all in the house, or everything. The owners had sold the house. We didn't know the house was for sale. We didn't know any. And so I spent a large part of the SAG strike trying to figure out how we were going to continue making that movie. And helping them move out of the house, but not take our stuff with them. And, like giving the set dressers a little bit of work to go in there and work with the previous owners, and then getting to know the new owners. So it was a whole adventure. I wish I could say, I went on vacation or something during the SAG strike or was out on the picket lines. But I was obviously in full support, but I was doing everything I could just to get us back in that house. And thankfully, whatever it was, November, when the strike was over, the new owners had come in. We had communication with them. They were super cool, and it was great. And it all ended up great. But it was that was a tricky part of this particular process for sure. And then we came back. Of course, there's another. I'm kind of getting off track a little bit, but another interesting thing is when you shoot the beginning of your movie in full blown summertime and then come back and it's the dead of winter. Like there's so much incredibly interest in the woods. There's so much incredible trickery that we had to from cinematography and framing and picking shots so that we weren't, because how jarring could that be if you're watching a movie and all of a sudden you're like, "Wait, why are all the leaves on the trees gone?" But it's barely noticeable in the way the movie comes together because we were thinking about that pretty much the entire time. And again, we had 5 months to think about that during the strike. But yeah, it was a tricky one, but also like just pretty great. It was pretty great. So that's my role essentially. The production team was pretty small on this one. It was mostly the Boulder Light guys, the Vertigo folks, Zach and myself. But yeah, it was a good time overall. Couple challenges, but there's always something.
I think this is one of those great moments in our podcast that really want to make you want to go watch the movie again and try to find those specific moments. It's insane.
I would have never known. Never.
No, that's the good thing. Don't, which I shouldn't be blowing it up. I don't want everybody to go in and dissect it now, but it's amazing. But it also goes to show you, if you do a story that is engaging enough and moves quickly enough and keeps people thinking about just the plot and the characters and all of that sort of stuff. I mean, look at Scorsese movies. There's continuity errors all over those things, but you're so engaged in Goodfellas or Casino or whatever that you don't think about stuff like that. But yeah, no, yeah. Feel free. You'll probably get a kick out of it, but I shouldn't blow it up too much. Now people are going to be like, "Wait a second." But yeah, yeah.
No, I'm sure it'll be fine. So with all of this, I mean, because there was a lot of thinking that had to go behind the first time, and then obviously having to wait for 5 months and whatnot. What was the most rewarding day on set for you, or off set while you were trying to figure out all of this out?
That's interesting. I mean, the most rewarding day offset was just getting the final email, notification that we officially were 100% going to be able to come back and finish shooting in that house. That was,
Hmm.
that was quite a relief. On set, I'm trying to think of what the most rewarding. I mean, the scene where we did the candle burning was really, really cool. Now everybody, spoiler alert. But the scene where we really singe that and how great it looks, because it's like obviously you can't really do that to someone's arm. So it's like there's prosthetics
Yeah.
involved, there's oh god, and the folks we got to do the mechanical arm, that again, spoilers everybody. The mechanical arm, so seamless, so wonderful, and just I think it was probably that particular scene was super cool. Either doing that scene or where we got the cool crane shot with all the fog. Yeah, being out there with all of the just like tubes of death, they call them, for all the fog during the we called it the pile of
Hmm.
bodies scene, where there's the crane shot above where Teddy falls onto the pile of bodies, and you see the Detective Hendricks' face all gnarled up, and it's Eli's body laying there with his like purple shirt on. That was a really cool one, where you just kind of stand back and you're looking at, like, you got all these big lights and this crane and the fog everywhere, and you're like, hey, look at that, we're making a movie, this is pretty cool. So that was great.
Yeah, it takes you back to that moment of like a fan.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and you can't really lose that, because there are hard days. You can't really lose that. Where else? I say this all the time when people get really excited about, oh, tell me about movie stars. Tell me you have such a cool job. I mean, I really just play pretend for a living. I just am a guy who liked playing pretend when I was a kid, and then somehow or another I make a living doing it. And it's super fun. I mean, but also it helps when it's with a really good group of people, and it was really contained. We were all just like in that house hanging out so much, like when we came back after the strike, we had this basement area in this really cool house, and they had a projector screen, and we just all sat around between shots when, like, we were sort of like, if we were like waiting for the sun to go down, or if we were waiting for some sort of setup or whatever. Yeah, every time we had downtime in between, like, we all were playing Mario Kart on this big projector screen in the basement of this house, like, and just having a great time. You know what I mean? Like, it was just like just sitting there hanging out with, like, Sophie, Jack, and Lucas, just like picking whether they're going to be Toad or Princess Peach, and like just like yelling at each other because they get red shelled or whatever. And then just, and it was just fun. It was fun. It was fun. We're all just goofing around, and you can tell that from the press. I think that the cast specifically has been doing. Like, I just think they had a really good time. Drew cast the movie perfectly. All the people that are in the movie. I mean, the movie itself, of course, is just like, the proof is in the pudding, right? Like, it really turned out well. I'm really happy people are enjoying it. But it was just a great experience, and I think a lot of that does kind of translate to screen.
Oh, for sure. As soon as we left, Helen was like, "This is one of the best theater experiences we've had
Yeah.
in a long time. I think
Oh,
since
that's great.
Babylon."
Yeah.
That's
So
great.
it felt
That's, I
just it
still
felt
I
great watching it. But
I still haven't seen Babylon. I need to see it. I've heard so
you
many
haven't
mixed
seen
things about it. No,
Babylon?
I know, it's insane. I really need to.
It has
And
some bad ratings.
yeah, 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 yeah.
It has some
Yeah,
bad
that's
ratings, but you gotta go watch it by yourself.
yeah, yeah, that's all right. I did a movie with bad ratings, and people seem to enjoy it mostly. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah, my movie, you were
Yeah, it's
talking
an
my
interesting
movie.
one.
my movie Split that you were saying, that my one directorial, of course, came out the same year that M. Night Shyamalan's Split came out. So we've got all these tanked
Mm.
ratings, but
Tough.
everyone who's really talking about our actual movie enjoyed it. But it's something happened when it came out. It's when people pirate movies, which is in my
Mm.
estimation, this is what you get when you pirate movies. But apparently, our movie, our bowling rom com, was the movie behind, a poster on some pirating site with James McAvoy's face on it. So countless people were clicking on this movie they thought was an M. Night Shyamalan like serial killer split personality movie, and they get a rom com about a girl who has to date a guy who's a good bowler. And we just got tanked in the ratings. Like it just like went completely sideways. We've got like a 2.9 or something on IMDb, and all the comments are just kind of like, I thought I was watching this other movie. So like you can't, sometimes that's an extreme version, but you can't always pay
That's
attention to
not my fault.
you can't always pay attention to the
Mhm.
ratings. Just go and watch the movie. So no, like I've heard people really, really talk about Babylon, to me, because sometimes you get those movies where it's like, no, you specifically as a human being, I know, and I know your taste would really enjoy Babylon. So I do need to watch it. It's on the list. I'm still working my way through the Best Picture nominees this year, honestly. So, but it's on the list. I got to check
I
Oh,
it out.
yeah.
know. Yeah, let's not get into Emilia Paris. We're talking.
Yeah. Yep.
Now that we're talking about more of you in your career, just in general, uh, when when do you compromise the vision of the director or the writer with the budget? Does the budget come first? Does the vision come first? Where do you find that compromise?
The budget never comes first. In my, there are
Mm.
people who attack it different ways, but the budget never comes first. The art always comes first. My priorities are always the safety, the human beings involved, all of us who are collaborating, then the story and the art, and whatever movie we're trying to make, and then I start thinking about the budget. So the budget is never prioritized over the story. And I work very closely with my directors, and pick the people I work with from a producing perspective, very carefully, knowing that that's my mission, my aim, the only way I know how to do this, honestly. And there are times though where you do have to compromise, and we do it in a collaborative way. We talk to the director and we say, like, listen, I know we really want to do X, Y, and Z, and we want to have this many days of shooting, and you really want to have this car wreck scene and that the other, but then sometimes you sit down and you're like, all right, I'm doing the numbers. I promise, professionally speaking, we've done everything we can, but we're at a point where we need to figure out the most extreme version and the easiest way to cut money. It's not easy, but like the best way to cut money from a budget, excuse me, is to cut out a day of shooting. But that's always such a compromise and such a fight, because you
Mm.
really want enough time to really be able to gather the best material for the project to be able to use in the editing room. But then sometimes it's as simple as like, okay, so instead of having a full blown car wreck scene that's going to involve stunts and special effects and all this kind of stuff, can we hear it happen off screen and still have it have the same effect for the story? Can this uh, fall out of a window happen as like something that happens in the background instead of something we're focusing on? I'm picking nothing but bad examples, but you know what I mean? It's sort of like, can we cut pages from the script that don't necessarily, that are beautiful and wonderful scenes, but maybe our story is best told by focusing on other scenes that we know we're going to be able to get. And you do that sometimes in the schedule also. You'll just be like, okay, here are the things we know we need to get, and then we'll leave at the end of the day or at the end of the shooting schedule, we'll leave these things, like if we have time we'll get to them. But and also 9 times out of 10, I'd say 99 times out of 100, if you say like time permitting or if we get there, you're not going to get there. So knowing that sometimes it does happen, and so you want to leave the door open for that possibility. But you basically, the short way of saying this is you do everything you can to not make creative compromises, but then sometimes it does happen, and you just make sure that you do it in a collaborative effort or in a collaborative way, and you make sure that everybody's on the same page of, okay, how do we get the cost of these things down but still serve the story in the best way we can. That's in my experience, that's the best approach.
For sure.
Mm.
And I guess the budget for Companion was not like Marvel levels of budget, but it wasn't a micro budget like an independent film. In your experience, do you prefer working and pulling off a film with a budget of zero and still managing to make the film, or do you enjoy having a decent budget to work with?
Oh, the trap. It's a trap of a question. Yeah, no, I think, I think there's pros and cons to all of it, right? There's truth to the old more money, more problems adage, right? So bigger projects with larger budgets are nice and they're comfortable in certain ways, but they also sort of give you so much time and so many resources to where like people almost overthink things. I do think that limitations, oh my God, there's so many like smart quotes that I am trying to think of right now that are not going to come out correctly, but it's sort of like, art is made in the limitations, basically like really like I do think that having a more tight budget, a smaller team, limited resources does sort of like fuel the creativity because you have to sort of do what's necessary, not like what you would want. Sometimes on these bottomless pit projects
Hmm.
that I've been on that have like endless money, they end up being bad because nobody's forced to make a decision. And you try everything, you throw everything at the wall, and nothing works, and nobody's incentivized to say no ever because like the resources are just there, and you can spin out forever, and you can push the project, and you can add more people, and you can shoot more days. It almost becomes more problems than it's worth. So forced to pick one, I would say working. I mean, it's kind of in the middle. The middle is the best version. I don't want to necessarily work on a movie where there's no money because then you're in a position where you're not paying people what their time is worth. You're not paying people fairly. And that's something I've been proud to not have to do for quite a while. Um, and you are compromising creatively because I do say you can make pretty much any movie for any amount of money, but there's a way to do it responsibly, and you do want just enough to do it in a way that looks polished. Like you're absolutely right. Companion did not have a huge budget, and I won't say exactly what that budget was. It's out in the world enough places if you want to dig a little bit, but we had enough to do it in a fun, responsible way. But we also did have to get really scrappy and creative with how we did certain things. People have been very kind in saying that movie looks, people guess the budget of that movie. It's always a much larger number than what we actually had. But that was by design. We knew where we needed to focus our resources to get to very specific points. Like it's like, we knew the spoilers, the corkscrew bit was going to be a feat. We knew the her shooting herself in the head was going to be a thing. We knew that the sequence of the car driving itself away and him getting his hands like there's certain little elements in there where we're like we know these are going to be big deal parts. We knew the drone shot looking into the dance party was going to be something that we needed to get pretty much perfectly right. So you just if you do it in a planned surgical way, and this is something you'll hear on so many different filmmaking podcasts, but it really is just like preparation, 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 and then go, and then you sort of, it's like making jazz. As long as you know the chord progression, you can improvise within that. Um,
Hmm.
so that's our approach. So the short answer is like, I guess somewhere in the middle. I'm not going to be upset if I end up on a Marvel movie, but I've joked with certain friends who are, oh God, I would love to go work on a Marvel movie or Star Wars. I'm like, part of me, that's one of my biggest nightmares because I'm like, I would just feel like I'm just such a cog in a machine. Whereas doing these smaller to like middle range budget movies, which we're in danger of losing, honestly, in this day and age in the film industry, people want you to make something for $2 or for $100 million, and the stuff in the middle, I think, is my favorite, and it's kind of the thing that's going away. I think we're going to find a resurgence of in this kind of contraction that we're finding after the streaming bubble has kind of burst and the strikes have kind of made the business folks sort of rethink their whole approach to this industry. I do think the middle range movie is going to start coming back, but we were for a long time and are kind of in danger of losing it. But I think that's really what I like, is somewhere in the middle where you don't have a bottomless pit of money, you don't have $2 to try and make a $20 product out of, but you have just enough money to do it right, but you have to be creative and really figure out the best way to put everything that you can onto the screen.
Now that you mentioned how film might look in the future, I think this is a great transition for our next question. You've been in the industry for a while now, and how has set life changed in that time? And how is it now? And what is something you wish you knew when you started?
Oh boy. All right, hold on. We're gonna take these one at a time. How is set life different than when I started? Honestly, when I came up, I wasn't on set quite enough. I came up through the production office. And, there was a little bit of separation for a long time of like, I'd go to set and I'd drop stuff off and I'd see all the craziness. But, when you're working in the production office, there is a lot of sort of like, you're there, you're answering the phones, you're doing emails, and you're a part of it. And you're really, I wouldn't change it for the world because you're absorbing everything. I'm talking to the studio, I'm talking to the accountants, I'm talking to the people on set, I'm talking to everybody. But then it took until a little bit later in my career when I was like on set more. And I think, you know, it's definitely changed in many, many ways, mostly because of the technology. When I first started, people weren't just like standing around on their phones, and I take so much, I don't want to say take issue. I'm not here to spread negativity or piss anybody off, but I do find it interesting when certain folks like ban chairs from their set or like tell people they can't look at their phones on set. And it's like, again, it goes back to my human being. Like, we're all human beings. People are going to have to sit down from time to time. I understand you don't want to distract the actors. Like, let's go back to the Christian Bale video. It's one of my favorite things to watch, where he flips out on set that one time. But I do think it's different now with having people sort of perpetually on their phone, and you're infinitely more reachable. Things can get done a lot more quickly because of things like emailing and texting, and everybody's got a cell phone on them. It used to be like talk about dating myself. Goodness, you're gonna think I should be dead and in the ground, but like I used to like drive around with a roll of quarters because somebody would like page you, and then you'd have to like find a phone to go and like call the office back, right? Or we'd have to print out a bunch of call sheets, go to the hotel and slide them under the doors of everyone's room, and then go back to the office and go to the fax machine. I don't know if you guys even know what a fax machine is. Put it in the show notes. But like I'd have to go and like do like the pre-programmed thing and fax the call sheet to like 100 different numbers. We were doing that on The Departed when I worked on that in New York in 2005. So it's definitely changed a lot, and it's largely because of things like that, because of the technology. And also, I have an opportunity, I think, coming up possibly to work on a project that's going to be shooting on film again, which is really
Mhm.
exciting because I think you have to be so much more calculated with that. The cameras
Yeah.
nowadays, like people can roll forever. You can do a billion takes. You can do all of that because digital has changed everything in that way. So there's a lot of differences like that. I think some for the better, many for the better, some for I have some additional thoughts on that, maybe not so much for the better, but it's definitely different than when I first started. And it's really just about like just making sure that you have the right group of people, because it's still crazy. It's still a crazy way to live. It's still, the hours are too long, the pay's not enough most of the time. So it's very, very different. It's certainly different. But pros and cons to that, mostly pros. And what was your hold on, there was another question within your question
What is
though. What did
something
I
that you wish you knew before you got started,
Hmm. Something I wish I knew before I got started.
or when you got started, when you first got into the film industry?
It's so funny because I don't know that I have a good answer to that, because I feel like I've been so fortunate to sort of learn around the people that I've come up around and work on the projects that I've worked on. I would say maybe just the idea of that I've embraced now, but knowing that, yeah, I guess this is the answer. I wish maybe I knew way back when I first started, that the volatility is always going to be there. These
Mhm.
last few years with the business, you know, when I would come up, I'd be like, okay, I have an office PA job, I have a production secretary job. Okay, now I have a few weeks down between jobs. I have a few months down between jobs. I would go and bar back. I started bartending at a certain point and picking up things in between jobs. And I kind of always had this like, oh, I'm going to get to a point where it's just going to be nonstop. I'm just going to work forever and everything's going to be great. And then you get into things like COVID came, and we're all
Mhm.
sitting around on our thumbs for 6 months, 8 months, whatever it was. And you're like, okay, all right, well, this is a bummer, but then this will be over. And then that, we get the upswing from that. And then boom, the strikes come. And then, okay, we get through the strikes, we come back. All right, everything's kind of back to normal. But like, it's really never, I think the new normal is slower. It's slower. We're never going to be back to this peak TV, I don't think. But really just like maybe if I could go back to my 23-year-old self, just say like, look, kid, just be ready. This is going to be, you got to be in this for the long haul. There's going to be ebbs, there's going to be flows. It's going to be amazing, but you just got to know that you're in for the ride. Which I'm 45 years old. I know now. It's like I joke I have no other marketable skills. Filmmaking, storytelling is my entire life. But truly, there's nothing I would rather be doing, and that's really something it'll benefit anyone young to know, like, if you're in it, you really need to be in it. And you need to know in your soul, at the core of your being, that you can't do anything else, because there are times when it's going to get tricky. It's going to get very, very difficult. Um, and I try not to say that anything is hard or easy, because I say that both of those are four-letter words. But it does take a little bit of stamina to ride the whole roller coaster of the ups and downs in
Mhm.
the business. Yeah.
Thank you. That is really meaningful.
It's funny you say 23. That's how old we are.
Speaking to us.
Yeah.
There you go. That's it. That's me imparting my little bit of wisdom that I have. But yeah, if you
Appreciate
want
it.
if you want to do this, you just gotta buckle up and go for the ride. It's not always going to be great, but the great times are great, and the low times are going to be low. But it's all really, really worth it in the end. You're really fighting for that moment where, this is the dumbest thing, but I'll tell this story really quick. It's kind of two stories. So we worked on this. I worked on this movie, Elizabethtown, my first movie back in my home state of Kentucky, and we see it with my parents, and my name comes on screen way deep in the credits, and like they stand up and clap in the movie theater, and it like made my heart explode, but I also wanted to crawl into my skin and die, right? I was super embarrassed. But again, just a few weeks ago, we go to IMAX and we see Companion, and I'm with my wife and one of our good friends, and my name comes up on the screen in IMAX in the middle of New York City. And my wife, bless her, is my favorite person in the whole world, just like squeezes my leg and like starts clapping just really softly. Like you
Oh,
go through these brutal, crazy times doing this wonderful, wonderful thing with all these wonderful, wonderful people. And it really all comes down to just that moment where you get to experience with, a room full of strangers, the people you love, experiencing it all together. It really goes back to Plato's cave, right? It's really just about sort of having that moment of just like that story sort of helping you fully realize like the joys of the human experience, right? Um, anyway,
that's great.
boy, yeah, I'm floating off into the ether. Anyway, yeah, it's
Oh, I
hard.
love
It's hard. It's hard, but it's beautiful. It's fun. It's important. It's all those things. So just stick to
it.
it.
Yeah. Getting a bit more technical as well again, before we start wrapping up. So coming from experience, obviously, to get into the film industry, many people have many different opinions on the best way to do it. Many say you need to do a production assistant. Some others say try to do your own stuff. You can for the production office. In your opinion, what is the best way to get into the film industry?
Um, I think the easiest to frame my sort of canned response, to your particular question, I think the best way to get into the film business is your way. There's no single way that is the best path. People have found a lot of success going to film schools and making the contacts that you get that way. People have made a lot of, headway by just going out and just making stuff and being that person. You know, you can go the assistant route, you can go the production office route, you can go the set PA route. Um, you can go I mean, look, my first real job as in any sort of entertainment, motion picture, anything was working, you know, while I was school teaching back in Kentucky. I was moonlighting as a camera assistant at one of our local news affiliates. So, you know, you can come in through local news, you can, you know, help people edit things. There's a million different approaches. I think there's a different approach to get into this business. There's as many different approaches to get into this business as there are human beings. There is no proven way to do it. There are are calculated approaches. There's certainly go and get a production office job. There's go get an internship, but that's another thing that I think is very privilege laden, honestly. Like, people who can get ahead by getting internships, are the people who can afford to work for free. But that also is a path. It's not my favorite, but it's a path. And if you have that available to you, it certainly works really, really well. So, that's really the short version. I think the best way to get into the business is the way that's right for you.
Awesome. And now to close up, what is your favorite movie? Many of our listeners come here figuring out what to watch next. So, what is your personal favorite?
It's funny. I'm always terrified of, like, whenever I get to the point, if the favorite four letterbox thing exists, like that terrifies me. So boiling that down to even one is even worse. I mean, look, the easiest response for me, and it's such a silly and I feel like popular version of this, but like The Big Lebowski, you can't go wrong with The Big Lebowski. I've probably not seen a movie more than that. I probably have no other movie as close to memorized. But there's so many others. Like When Harry Met Sally, I've seen a billion times, and like is one of the big reasons why I made a rom-com as my first movie. I was joking that a criminally undersung movie is the Josie and the Pussycats movie that Deborah Kaplan and Harry Elfont did years ago. And The Naked Gun was on the other day, and I was like, this is the perfect comedy. This is amazing. But like, then you go to 25th Hour, I think is sometimes, if you catch me on the right day, I think 25th Hour is one of the greatest pieces of cinema, we've ever seen. I think it's absolutely incredible. And I think Spike Lee is a voice that we're never going to see the likes of again. Probably, maybe the best filmmaker voice of our generation. But yeah, I mean, the easy answer is Big Lebowski. That's my go-to.
Awesome. And then you mentioned a documentary coming up and a feature coming up on the workings. But if you want to plug anything, what is coming up for Jamie Buckner?
I mean, plugging wise, yeah, I got a movie called 499 Days. That's a documentary. We're hoping to, be at we're kind of at a rough cut stage, hoping to be at a finer cut stage and start submitting to festivals later this year. So then that would hopefully be on some sort of festival run next year. We're putting together financing for a two-hander movie, called Due East, with a wonderful cast that we're hoping to do in the Catskills, potentially Pennsylvania. That's like a Western period drama, just about the human experience of like grief and perception, a bunch of themes. But, really it boils down to, it's a Western that takes place in the Catskills. Call it an Eastern if I'm being playful. But around that same time period, it's basically two people walking in the woods looking for a little girl that's run away. But a lot more than that. So those two are the things kind of on the horizon. They're not going to be around anytime super soon, but yeah, keep an eye out. And I'm just going to keep plugging away. I'm going to keep, trying to get those off the ground and get those out into the world, but also just, we'll see. One of about half dozen projects will be my next, companion type gig. So that should be sooner than later. But that's all I've really got to plug. 499 Days in Due East. But by the time those are out in the world, people have long forgotten this podcast probably. But
we'll repost.
Yes.
Yeah, I
Jamie, where
appreciate.
can people follow you?
You're the best, guys. I really appreciate it. And thank you for having me. What a wonderful thing you all are doing. And it's so nice to talk to people who are just excited about storytelling and about what we do. So just like, thank you for putting this energy out into the world, this product.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for being here and joining us at
Yeah.
Foreign Cod. Where can people follow you?
I mean, I'm on Instagram. I'm so off of social media lately these days, but like I keep my toe dipped in it. I'm just posting a lot less frequently. I mean, I think I'm just Jamie Buckner everywhere. JamieBuckner. Instagram, Blue Sky. I think I'm technically still on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. Twitter, all the different things. I think, like TikTok, I lurk on but don't post on, but I'm on there too. If you want to follow me there, I think I just don't post anything. But yeah, just all the different things. It's either Jamie Buckner or the Jamie Buckner, just about anywhere. And I think it's mostly attached to some mug that looks like this face. So I'm not hard to track down. Also, anybody, honestly, I'd offer to your listeners, I'm also not hard to reach if anybody has any questions or if you all have any follow-up questions. Like, you know, you can just, the easiest way is through the company. It's Derby City Productions, like Louisville, Kentucky, where I'm from. So like the Kentucky Derby. So Derby City Productions at Gmail. Anybody can reach out anytime. I'm always happy to help out people. It's funny to me when people are so hard to get at, because I'm just like, we all just need to, what are people in the future going to have to watch if we're not helping the younger generations? So I'm always happy to answer any questions and have a conversation with just about anybody. So including you fine folks.
Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jamie, so much for joining us here in Cod once again. I think it was a great conversation.
Yeah,
I love having you over here. Hopefully we can have you again for one of your next projects. That'll be really exciting to see.
That'd be great.
And
I guess thank you everybody for listening. Thanks for having me. And yeah, it's been a pleasure to talk. And cut.
thank you so much for watching this episode of Uncut. You can follow us on all social media, starting with Instagram as Uncut the podcast. You can also follow us on YouTube as That Film Couple, which is the same handle for TikTok, That Film Couple for short form content. You can also follow us on Twitch as Sebasparra1K. And if you're watching right now on YouTube, you can find us on any podcast platform as Uncut exclamation mark. Last but not least, you can follow me on Instagram as sebi.mp4.
And you can follow me at caitlin.mp4.
Thank you so much for being here one more week, and we'll see you in the next one.